This is Randall Root, and in this video we'll take a look at how to create a set of tables, foreign keys, and primary keys in a database using the SQL diagramming tools. To start off, I'll need a database, so I'll just right-click and make a new database on Solution Explorer. And when the dialog window pops up, I'll just come up with an example, a database name. So let's call a diagram test. Now the ownership should be some account that you know exists, and it helps if it exists on all machines. There's a built-in account called System Administrator that exists on all SQL installations. Now it's true that the System Administrator has been turned off on all installations of SQL Server for security reasons, but it still exists. And what we're really looking here is a mapping. If the mapping exists, you'll be able to use the diagramming tool. If a mapping doesn't exist, you won't. And that's important. Let's say that I make a user account called Randall on my machine. So it's Randall's laptop and the Randall account. If I do that, then I'd go ahead and put the computer name / the name of the user account. The only problem is that when I back up the database and send it to you as a student, and you want to restore the database or detach and attach, whatever it is, you won't have that Randall account. It will no longer be a legal mapping on your machine. So instead of using that, when I want to use the diagramming tool, and I want to be able to share the database between lots of people, like in a case of a class environment, SA works. In production, you can of course use a real legitimate account. But I'm going to go ahead and use SA. Now the database is made. I may have to hit refresh before I see it. There it is. Now, I can go ahead and make tables by just right-clicking and making a new table. That's fine. It works just fine. Of course, I can go ahead and make a new query window and type in the SQL code and create a set of tables that way. And once again, that works just fine too. It's tried and true. But another option, a third option, would be to go through and create a database diagram. If when you make a new database diagram, the first time you have to install the database diagram support objects. If you don't, it'll prompt you for it when you make a new database diagram. There's the prompt. If I would have chosen to install the supporting objects, I wouldn't have seen the prompt. You gotta wonder why they even bothered putting the extra link in there. Doesn't matter though. Now, when you first do this, there's no tables in the database, and this always throws people off because, I mean, you get this blank dialog box and there's nothing to do there. So, quite literally, you just close it down. Next thing is to go through and make a new table, and from there, you're able to go through and put in your columns like uncheck null, and uncheck null again. Now to make a primary key, I can go over and right-click on the column that I want, customer ID, and I choose the little box off to the left and right-click and say set as a primary key. And when I hit the save button, little floppy disk will ask me the name of the diagram. I should give it a logical name, and it'll go ahead and save my table. My table is actually created in the database now. Now, I don't think the name of the table is all that good. I should have actually changed it like customers. Well, when I first started up, I could have given it that name, but I didn't. So if you make a mistake, which happens, all you have to do is just go through and change the name. If the property window isn't showing, you can go view properties window. But if it is, you can go ahead and change the name. Notice that the star appears, indicating that something has changed. And then you go ahead and hit the floppy disk button again, and it'll save your work. Interestingly enough, you may also see the scroll looking button appear, generate change scripts. If you click on that, it'll actually give you the SQL code that is used to accomplish this mission. Take a look at this. It says alter the table, drop the primary key constraint. Wait a second. Execute, rename. Execute, and that's a stored procedure that allows you to rename something. It alters the table and then adds it back on so that the name is associated with the customers table. Basically, just change the name. That's a nice way to steal code. I use it all the time when I'm too lazy to type it out. Now that's, oh, I see why. Scripting button. I must have said OK, and it's asking me, where would you like to save that script file to? Well, I'll tell you the truth, I really don't, so I'll hit cancel. Well, I'll just go ahead and save my work at that point. Now let's say I want to make another table. I just right click and say, yeah, make a new table. Let's call it sales. And I'll have a sales ID. And let's say that I have a sales line item. Now this is denormalized, and since I teach a variety of classes, including regular OLTP database designs as well as data warehousing database designs, I'm going to go ahead and leave it denormalized like this. Often you'd break this into the line items into a separate table. But for this demonstration, I'll just do it this way, because in a data warehouse design, you typically collapse the two tables into one. So just forgive me for my lack of normalization if you're doing a class with me on just standard database design. Anyway, so in here I'd have like the customer ID. And, oh, I don't know, like a product ID. And maybe an integer. An integer, I'm so sorry. How about like oh, come on, quantity. Integer. Okay, so now I have a sales table. I'll hit the save button to save my work. And sounds good. And I need to put a primary key on here, so I'll right click and hold down the control button. As I hold down the control button, I can highlight more than one column. Now, simple to me because I've done it a million times now, but I remember when I first started off, it did seem a little confusing. It's really quite simple. Hold down the control button and left on each column. So click, because I have to click the first column first. Click the first column, hold down the button, click the second column. Both are highlighted now, and right click and say set primary key. The order that you do it in does make a difference. So the column that's going to be used the most should actually be the one you select first. In this case, the also the one that has the greatest amount of variety. But sales ID and sales line item would be just fine. So I just go ahead and click those, and now I have a composite primary key. Now, if I want to make a foreign key relationship between the two tables, it's pretty easy to do as well. All you have to do is actually, before I go any further, it already has a foreign key relationship. The customer ID is a column that refers to the customer ID in the customers table. So there is a logical relationship. What I was really meaning to say was a foreign key constraint. And what that does is it will not allow me to put a customer ID in the sales table that doesn't exist on the customers table. Let's say that in the customers table I have customer ID 1, 2, and 3. Well, I can put in customer ID 1, 2, or 3 in the sales table. But if I try to put a 4 in there, that would not work. It would give me an error message if I have a foreign key constraint. But if I don't have a foreign key constraint between these two, there's no checking happening by the database engine. It's up to me to be a good person and not put values in there that don't exist. Since humans are known to make mistakes, putting a foreign key constraint has been a common tool that people have been using for a long time. And I did that rather quickly. What I did is I left click on the customer ID, I drag, holding the button, I just to the customer ID column in the customers table. Then you say OK. Now, you don't want to drag from, that is not correct. You want to drag sales table to the customer table. Think of a table have unique. The customer ID in the customers table is unique values. 1, 2, 3 is not repeated. But we're hoping a customer buys again and again and again. So we're hoping a customer 3 buys over and over again. So the 3 should be repeated under customer ID. This means that customer ID in the sales table is the child column, and customer ID in the customers table is the parent column. So you drag from the child to the parent. Some people are discouraged that the line between the two, the foreign key relationship, that's what this line represents, does not actually line up directly with the columns. And things like Visio it does, but Visio costs hundreds of dollars, and this one comes for free when you get SQL Server. At one point in time they were talking about removing this. I think it had something to do with the competition of Visio. But whatever the case may be, yeah, it's annoying, but it works just fine. So you do not have to line it up like I did by moving the sales table. You can leave it alone. And as you can see, it can be kind of a pain if you want to really play with it. You can drag it all around and have a good time with it, but it's really not as much fun as it looks. So with that, we have two tables created. We have a composite foreign key relationship constraint, defined. Relationship foreign key between customers. Note that I'm the right way because the single key points to the unique customer ID, and the infinity symbol points to duplication of those values in the sales table. One last thing that can be confusing. Certain operations will cause a table to be recreated. And what happens is that, let's say that we have in the sales table, we have hundreds and hundreds of rows of data. So if we did have that, it might well be that the recreation of this table could take an hour or so before it. I said hundreds. Let's say millions. It could take an hour maybe to rebuild. Anyway, to stop people from doing things that would cause a rebuild, Microsoft put this feature in that will not allow you, without setting an option, to create or make a change that would cause a table recreation. I'm sorry, I clicked in a bunch of places there. Please forgive me on that. Let me try this again. I'm going to go ahead and try to make it give me that type of error. In order to do that, I'm going to say that I'm no longer allowing nulls in the customer ID, which somehow makes sense. So, under Tools, under Options, and under the Designers section, there's a spot here for Table and Database Designers that, when checked, prevents saving changes that require table recreation. Error message I was just new. And when you first install SQL Server, now when I try to do my work with a null there, it's save saving changes is not permitted. You have made changes to require the table dropped and recreated. To understand this, take a look at the yes, thank you. To understand this, take a look at the SQL script. Oh, okay. Let me uncheck that box, and we'll take a look at the SQL script. Tools, Options, Table Designer, and uncheck the box. And now I'll go over here and hit that little script button. And you'll see that the way that Microsoft did this was they go through and they create a table called temporary sales. They build that, and then what they do is they pour the data from the they pour all the data from the sales table into the temporary sales table. They just fill it up with the data from there. After they're done, they drop the original sales table, and then they rename the temporary one to sales. So that's the recreation part, and it works just fine. The only reason why Microsoft disabled that is so that in a production environment, you'd make a small change like that, and you would be like, "Oops! For some reason, the thing's been running for an hour," and everybody in the company is kind of wondering, "Why did you press that button?" So on a home machine, on a test, not a big deal to go ahead and allow this to occur. It works effortlessly. Your changes saved. So was tools and designers database design. Uncheck that box. You see that the diagramming tool is actually a very easy way to work with the database to create tables, including foreign key constraints. I hope this helps you find or get good use out of this particular tool.